Hey everyone, so this last week I celebrated 20 years of being licensed as a funeral director and got a message from someone and said, hey, why don't you share some of your most memorable moments of being licensed in those 20 years. So I've put together 20 moments that I will forever remember from my first 20 years of being licensed. Obviously there's many, many more, but I sat down and just kind of went with the first 20 things that came to my mind, which to me meant they were some of the biggest moments that I encountered. So the first one is when I made pre-arrangements with a pregnant woman for her baby because they knew that the child was not going to live after being born if it lived outside of the womb at all. And that was such a huge moment to touch a pregnant woman's belly and feel and know that there's this child in there and that I would soon be caring for it. If you haven't watched my video with Kari, as her name as well, check that out. That tells our whole story together. And I think that was such a big moment because it has, our friendship has carried over the years since that time. Number two, I don't know if we officially became like a celebrant, did some training, but ended up speaking at a lot of funerals for a period of time. Still love doing that, but did quite a bit of it for a while. And there was one funeral that really stuck out to me because when I got done, I was like, man, I nailed that. And it was a packed standing room only funeral. It was in an evening, so a lot more people could attend, younger guy, and I used duct tape in the service. I talked about MacGyver and all sorts of things, and it just really was so focused on the man and just knew that I had taken his essence in his life and put it into a service, and it was a great, amazing feeling to do that. I think the third, so there was this moment at a cemetery and there was a casket spray and the man had died and the woman was still living and her grandson was walking her up to the casket one last time. The service was done and out of the blue she yells something about how he used to send his lover roses. I hate roses. And I still think about it. It was like, I can't even imagine the look that was on my face. But the grandson looked at me and I looked at him and we both kind of were like, okay. So he just quietly walked her away and off to the car. But we remembered at her funeral, not too long later, there were no roses. Number four, the first time I went to a home for a removal to bring someone into the care of the funeral home, and it was a child. So that is really only going to happen if it is a hospice death at home, an expected death from cancer, some other type of illness. And that's what the situation was. Taking a person out of a home is, to me, such a huge thing, let alone a child. Taking a child away from its parents. That's a big moment. And so I will never forget the first time going into a home and taking a child away from the parents. And that's essentially what we're doing when we go and bring somebody into our care. And that was heavy. It was heavy. I don't even know another word for it. Number five, sitting with the kids of a couple that was killed together. I've buried a few couples over the years, and the one family particular had a blended family, so it was his and her kids. They didn't have any kids together. They had gotten married later in life, had this new beautiful marriage together. They were so happy, and to die together in an accident and have their kids all come together to take care of them and to celebrate this relationship that they had later in life was so beautiful. And I worked with them really closely, but then had to be out of town for the actual funeral. And it was such a disappointment. I was glad I think I was going for a wedding, if I remember correctly. And of course, that's a great celebration, but to not be able to see the whole thing through with this family was really sad for me. Number 6. The first time one of the times I had a disarticulated body, so arms, legs, pieces were possibly cut off. In this situation, it was a leg, and from like the knee down, and I just stood there for a little while with this leg or partial leg in my hands, staring at the body on the table, holding this leg and thinking, okay, so this is it, huh? This is what I'm doing. This is what I chose. Who does this? Just kind of these crazy moments that you do step back and go, why did I choose this? Or, wow, I did choose this. This is awesome. Or, all these crazy aha moments, I guess, that we have. Next one is, had a child that had died in a farming accident and had been run over by a tractor and had to reconstruct the child's head and had been given a short time frame. The funeral director had promised viewing a few hours after we'd received the body. I needed way more time and didn't have it. And will never forget the pressure of that moment, the magnitude of the moment, knowing what I was trying to do, knowing that these parents were waiting to see this baby, this little kid, and not being able to do it to the level I wanted to, and just feeling like I was fumbling along the way because of the pressure. That was rough. That was hard. Number 8, caring for my own family. Grandparents, very close friends, my niece when she was killed, a lot of people over the years that I've known, a lot of older people from my church growing up that I've been able to take care of, but especially grandparents and my niece, and being able to be that person for them. Big deal. Huge deal. Huge deal. Number 9, meeting the grandson of someone I was burying and ending up dating. So we met at visitation and ended up going and meeting the whole family later for drinks. And then a couple weeks later saw each other and he asked me out. We dated for a little while. So the only time I've ever met and dated somebody that was a family member at a funeral. Sitting with a family with 18 kids, making arrangements. Obviously, imagine the age span. You've got the top of the 18 kids could be parents to the middle, and they could be parents to the youngest. So quite the age span of kids within this family, but all 18 kids, and how well they all got along, better than some families that have 2 kids in them. But that was a huge magnitude that a family, just the immediate family, has like 100 people in it. It was such a big family. It was really just a cool thing to see how they all functioned together, how well they got along, how still joined they really were. Number 11, reading a suicide note that we had. And it said, I hope you're happy now that I'm gone. And I think about that once in a while, and the sadness and feeling someone has to feel to do that, hoping the end result would be somebody else, getting back at somebody else, or hoping they're happy. I just can't imagine that pain inside. It's just, it's heart-wrenching. But seeing that, because it was right there, open, and one of those big moments. Number 12, having a Sports Illustrated writer interview me about a funeral I had done. So I had buried a young man who died right after a huge basketball game, just a big press funeral, international news, And so Sports Illustrated had contacted me and wanted to interview me for a piece about him for an article. So that was kind of a crazy big moment. Number 13 is receiving the folded U.S. flag at the graveside for a veteran out at a national cemetery who had no family. And we buried him there. Well, take that back. He had a sister who was in her 90s who lived in Chicago, and she was the only family that he had. There was no nieces, nephews, no children, nobody else. And so it was just me and the military personnel at the cemetery. So I received the flag for him, mailed it to his sister, and it was just such a sad moment, but I was very honored to be part of it and to just be there. It also made me realize that any moments like that in the future are great moments to use social media and say, hey, I'm going to be burying a veteran. If you're around the area and would like to come and honor them, please join us. And so, moving forward, love that approach to it rather than being this quiet moment that passes that nobody recognizes really. So definitely a big learning moment for me, but also very honored by it. Number 14 was burying fetal demise. And that is what burying babies who die in utero, it's called a fetal demise. And doing that in a special way. Hospitals often would discard or incinerate stillbirths, fetal demises at certain ages. It's an option for mothers over the years that they could do that. They didn't like that at the one funeral home that I would help at. And so they started a program where they would, for no cost, bury the babies in the grave, but you dig the grave and put the baby right into the soil. So burying dozens of babies in that way in all gestational phases. So getting to see, what does a 12-week-old baby in gestation look like? What does a 30-week-old baby in gestation look like? Crazy, which makes me think of a bonus one, which I don't have in this list, is when I was 23 weeks pregnant, I buried a 23-week fetal demise. So caring for a 23-week gestational baby when I was 23 weeks pregnant. Huge, insane, ironic moment to have. But yeah, so that happened. There's a bonus one for you. So there'll be 21. Number 15, the first murder victim who I buried. And I will truly never forget her. I can see her face. I think one of the biggest things I remember about her in the big picture was the casket color, her nail color, her dress color, all matched perfectly. They were all this kind of burgundy mauve color, and they all matched perfectly. And she had gorgeous long hair. She had been raped and murdered, and it jarred me, I think, more than I would have ever anticipated, looking at and working on someone who their last moments were in fear, possibly pain, scared, just all of what could be in those moments. And I don't know, it's hard to wrap words around looking and caring for somebody and knowing that had just happened to them, and now you're caring for them. It kind of messes with your mind a little bit there. Sitting and making arrangements with a parent who may have killed their child or been part of why they were dead at that point. So if somebody is possibly under suspicion but can't be arrested, they can still make arrangements for their child, and you work with them. Whether they were responsible or not, it's not up for you to judge, but what a hard situation to not pass judgment, not be the jury, and to just work with them. without impression on the situation, and try to just care for the child or the person that has died the best you can. You know, you would probably counter this scenario maybe with a spouse that has died as well sometimes. Yeah, rough situation. And I'm sure there are people who deal with it a lot more in, you know, certain areas and things, but have not done it a lot, don't want to do it a lot. Number 17. Had buried a younger man, and he had a 2-year-old son, and when his girlfriend brought in the 2-year-old, and the 2-year-old went toddling through the room, arms outreached right up to the casket saying, "Daddy, daddy, 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 daddy." Heartbreak. Just the first time really ever experiencing anything like that, and it was just just so many big emotions from some of those first moments that I'd never felt and didn't know would be coming or how I would react, and that was one of them. Number 18, there's been 2 moments that are so vivid from first viewing, and that's the time when a family comes in and sees their loved one for the first time in the casket. Sometimes it's the first time they see them dead, where, you know, if someone dies in an accident, they may not see them. It's just like this concept that they've died until they actually view them. And so it's the magnitude of the moment is even bigger. And there was a moment, a fiance came in, and the soul crushing pain that you could just feel come from him was, I think it's the most grief stricken person I have encountered ever at any funeral. It was horrible to feel the waves of that emotion come off of him. So I just, yeah, that was bad. And then there was a girl who came in and saw her brother and just fell to her knees, and that's not a common reaction. You think maybe it is, but it's not as common as put out there, I think, by media and by TV and movies and stuff. And I was younger, I was in my earlier days of funeral directing, and so I was still connecting to, oh my gosh, if that was my brother, how would I feel? And so I kind of went there with my mind, and I think that's why it hit a lot harder even. Number 19, realizing that I bring bad memories to people. You know, I have good memories working with a lot of families, and so it's nice to see them when you go to the grocery store or outside of work. But to them, that's not always the case. And I was at a grocery store once, and I saw a lady, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna have to say hi to her, you know, blah, blah, blah. She like did an about face and went the other way and like basically ran away from me. And so I was like, oh, I thought that she liked me and that we had a nice time when we worked together, like that it was a good working relationship type thing. But I realized that seeing me reminds her of the loss that she had, and it reminds her of the pain, and it reminds her of the hurt and the sadness, when that's not what she was thinking about. She was just thinking about going to the store to get milk and bread, and whoosh, slap across the face, here comes Kari, the funeral director. Not what she wanted to think about. And so I realized that not everybody wants to see me. I bring back sadness, and I bring back a feeling they don't want to feel, especially caught off guard or out of the blue or at the bar and on a night or something, and they see you, and especially with drinking, whoo, it all comes out. So definitely a lesson to learn, funeral directors, and, you know, just to share. Number 20, my first death certificate that I signed as a licensed funeral director. And that whole funeral was a big, huge moment in my career. It was the first one I signed as a licensed funeral director, and there's so much about that funeral that will forever stick with me. I live very close to where a car accident happened that the young man, it was a young man who died, that the young man died in. And so I see that spot a lot, and I think about him all the time. I drive past where his house it was all the time. I can tell you what his address was. I remember a lot about, him and the death certificate and everything. It was a big deal. We work towards that licensure. We work towards that privilege of getting to sign a death certificate. So the first one, kind of a big moment, and just learning a lot from those, learning a lot about rude kids, teenagers, dealing with some teenagers who push past the family to be there to see the person, and working with twins, divorced parents. That's a big thing to learn, how to work with parents who are divorced and may have different opinions on things and may need separate time with the child or the family. And so all these different things were mixed into that first call that I signed my first death certificate for. So I think some of these surprised me now reading them back after I wrote them all down the other night. But they all are such huge moments along the course of my career. And to think I've been licensed doing something for 20 years is insane to me. If you'd have asked me back when I was, 15 or something, I think you think when you've been doing something for 20 years, you are going to feel super old and way further along than you are. And I'm just like, wow, I feel super young right now. How can I have been doing something for 20 years? So yeah, I'm glad I get to share it with you guys. Ask me questions, post comments below. Thanks for sharing some memories from my first 20 years being a licensed funeral director, embalmer, mortician, whatever you want to call it. Thanks, guys.